And welcome back, everybody, for another episode of As the Badge Turns podcast. Scott Nocon joined each week with Sheriff Rich Stanek. And this week we have Sheriff David Mahoney with us. So far, this is our 7th episode, and we really made it a point, for me, to kind of just sit back and just let the conversation go. So, again, David, I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you making the time. Really would just kind of love for you just to tell us what brought you into law enforcement to begin with.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thanks to As the Badge Turns. It's great to join my good friend, Rich Stanek, former Hennepin County Sheriff. And so we kind of both grew up as sheriffs together, not only in our respective communities, but at the national sheriff's level, the major county sheriffs level, and in retirement. I've done some work with Rich and truly consider him to be a good personal and professional friend. It truly is an honor to join you. I loved being a law enforcement officer. I began my career in 1979 in a small rural village police department, 19 years of age. Had never even thought about going into law enforcement. I was actually in nursing school, believe it or not, planning to become a critical care nurse. But while I was finding a way to pay for it, I was dispatching for a local city police department, and the chief asked me to think about a career in law enforcement. So I filled out an application and went through the process and got hired by this small village police department, which is where I began my career. And 9 months later was recruited to join the Dane County Sheriff's Office, which is located in Madison, Wisconsin. It's the second largest city in Wisconsin, only a little bit smaller than Milwaukee, about 780,000 residents in the county, over 600 sworn deputies in the sheriff's office. So I began my career working in corrections, working in the jail. And one of the things that I saw as I began my career with the sheriff's office was the number of people who were coming into the criminal justice system who suffered from addiction and mental health, whose introduction to the criminal justice system was as a result of today what we would consider a diagnosed medical disease. But it took over the jail. The vast majority of the people who were incarcerated were suffering from one of those two or both diseases. Over my career, I spent 41 years with the Dane County Sheriff's Office, served in a number of assignments, the longest of which was assigned to the Detective Bureau, working a variety of various crimes, major crimes to domestic violence, to crimes against children, to sex crimes. I was sitting on the union board at the time, and I thought it was time to quit just talking about how I thought the sheriff should run the organization. I should step up and put my words where into action. And that's what I did. And I spent 15 years serving as the Dane County Sheriff, the 52nd Sheriff of Dane County, and, started with trying to implement some culture change and setting priorities and values that would identify who we were as the men and women of the Dane County Sheriff's Office. And during that time, that's when I met Rich. Rich had had a major incident occur in his county, the bridge collapse. And I attended a conference in which Rich talked about the response and the responsibility of the Office of Sheriff and how he, working with multiple agencies, spearheaded a community response to that catastrophic failure. And it was from that initial contact that we began our professional relationship. Subsequently, I became a member of the National Sheriff's Association, which is the association in Washington, D.C. that represents approximately 3,060 sheriffs across the country. And like Rich, I eventually joined the board of directors, then began serving on the chairs, and in 2021 served as the national president. Rich and I both served on the major county sheriffs of America board of directors, representing the largest sheriff's offices across the United States. And as a result, I certainly feel that we built a personal relationship and a friendship to last today and well into the future. I have the greatest respect for Rich and his family and his wife, Sally, and just appreciate working with him on a variety of projects now in retirement.
No, that's excellent. And thank you, Sheriff. That's definitely a very illustrious career in doing it. But let's focus on when you wanted to put into action, take us through that. You wanted to run for sheriff. I said, now I need to put kind of action into words?
Well, from 1994 until 2006, served as a local board member for the local union for the Deputies Association, eventually rose to become the president of that association, sat on the board for the state association representing all the law enforcement union members throughout the state, and eventually rose to serve as the president of the state association. We were a member of NAPO, the National Association of Police Organizations. And so I eventually rose to sit on the board for the national organization. So I was a local, state, and national labor leader, serving in an organization that, like many law enforcement agencies, is top-down decision making. You could send an idea up through the chain, but you really had no knowledge whether it reached the highest level, particularly the sheriff, who is the ultimate decision maker in the sheriff's office. And although I had many personal meetings as a union member, union president with the sheriff, I never knew whether any of my ideas or the ideas of the people I represented ever really came to fruition. And to be honest, most of them didn't. They died on the vine at a much lower level of supervision. And so in 2006, the sheriff, who was a friend of mine, he was a neighbor. Matter of fact, he was in my backyard. We shared backyards, and we'd often talk off duty as well about law enforcement. And so when he announced his retirement, I decided that, I've been talking all these years about how the sheriff ought to run this organization. And I truly believe that, problems are solved when you bring the problem, but have an idea of a solution with you. It's not just somebody else's problem to solve, not just the sheriff's problem. And so I decided that I was going to run because I had some ideas on changes that needed to occur. I wanted a more dispersed leadership model where the staff that we hired, who were highly capable, who we equipped with all the tools you need in this profession, we train them to the highest level, but then we don't ask them how they would run the area in which they work. And they're the ones that actually know it the best. And so that was the model that I implemented when I was elected in 2006, was a culture change to kind of turn that leadership model upside down, certainly retain the authority of the sheriff, but to invite those working within the organization to be part of the decision makers, to sit on committees, to help audit the progress that we were making in that cultural change, and to involve them in the solutions of the issues that needed to be addressed. And over the 15 years it worked. I thought it would be quicker than it turned out to be, but it turned out to be like, taking a battleship and turning it around in the Mississippi River. It would take a few days. Well, it turned out it took several years.
Yeah.
And it took trying to persuade people that I was honest and I was truly wanted that change. And that comes from years and years and years of trying, as Rich knows, having grown up in this profession as well. And today, actually in May of 21, when I retired, I think the organization was a better organization than it was when I took the helm in January of 2007. And the progress that my replacement is making it a better organization than it was under my command. And I couldn't want anything more than that.
True.
Yeah.
That's a true testament. So David, you worked for a number of sheriffs over the years. If you could build the ideal sheriff other than yourself, what would he or she look like? Because you've got a whirlwind of experience.
Well, it would be somebody who knows the organization, knows the community, who's heavily engaged in the community, because as we in this profession know, it's not our law enforcement agency. It's not our sheriff's office. It's not our city police department. It's not our state law enforcement. It's the community that we serve that sets the priorities and the needs. And so I would look for somebody to be heavily involved in the community, who's listening to the needs and then moves forward to implement those changes, but also involved at the national level, because there are decisions being made in Washington, D.C. that impact every law enforcement agency in this country. So I would look for that leader to be involved at a national level, to have a voice, and then also be open to changes in technologies. There are technologies that are emerging today that weren't existent when I started my profession, nor were they in existence when I started my career as sheriff. And many will make our community safer. Many will make our men and women safer. And in the end, help build the trust that we hope to earn in our communities. And at the end of the day, that's really what we do as law enforcement leaders.
Speaking of technology, and that's been a topic, Sheriff Rich has spoken to that in previous episodes, and a few others obviously have kind of given their opinions on that. Focusing on that really quick, is there certain technology that stands out to you that when it came on board, and it could be still in its infancy, but when it came on board, you said, okay, this is going to make a difference, or I can see it making a difference? And I guess compare that also, contrast to a technology that came on board that really didn't hit that well. So was there one that was good for you and you saw benefit, and one that maybe wasn't as developed, maybe it is more so now, that didn't really hit the mark?
Well, there are many tools that we are given or have access to in this profession. But, the emergence of drones, I think, are a wonderful and emerging technology that will have a multitude of solutions for the jobs that we do as law enforcement leaders. Drone technology and new devices come out into access to law enforcement. I think we need to stay on top of that. I think that new technologies that diminish the use of force, ultimately deadly force. We will never remove firearms from a law enforcement officer, nor should we. We spend a great deal of time training our men and women at the highest level, both physically, mentally, on how to prepare themselves for use of deadly force, and it is a necessary tool. But we need to look at other technologies as well that can diminish the need for the use of a firearm. And there are some out there, whether it be chemical related agents or restraint type devices that can be utilized to prevent somebody from escaping or getting into a pursuit, or any of these issues that law enforcement always deals with and put men and women of law enforcement in great danger. Use of force is an issue to me because in the later years of my career as sheriff, and Rich, this will hit home, emerged from the George Floyd incidents of Minneapolis. And I'm not going to judge the incident, but the incident certainly lit a fuse in our communities. Even in my community, we had for several weeks 40,000 plus protesters out in front of my office. My jail was firebombed. We had over 20 businesses burned to the ground in Madison. And I had 3 separate protests of 300 people plus at my home, where I was downtown with 40,000 protesters meeting with them while my wife was barricaded in the basement, while protesters surrounded her house, banged on the windows and doors. Thankfully didn't do damage, but nonetheless scared the daylights out of my family. Not for anything that I did. But all of us as leaders need to look at that as an awakening on how we have to rebuild relationships in our communities. And in my last several months, that's what I worked to do. And we're feeling the outcome of that yet today. And so we need to work closer with our communities and try to meet them where their needs arise and where the needs of law enforcement arise. We're still feeling, as a profession, the effects of defund the police. And for some time, I think we're going to. And as a profession, we need to better understand and articulate what that really means.
Scott, I think that's a great question about technology, and David, hit on a lot of them, but I think about the 6 things that I think changed policing dramatically over the last 30, 40 years of our career and will continue into the near future. One is an interoperable radio system. We can chase people down all we want. You can't outrun a radio. And a lot of bad guys try, but they just can't do it. They come out on the losing end each and every time. Tasers, right? Less lethal force, but using tasers to subdue someone, incapacitate someone, rather than the alternative, is always a better alternative. Body-worn cameras, we talked about that for a minute, being able to document. They used to be, kind of the silent witness. Many cops and sheriffs thought, well, we'll never see the light of day. There's no way this is ever going to be ingrained into the police profession. But here we are today. The vast majority of agencies use body-worn cameras. And then I think cell phones, right? Everybody's got one. Most sheriffs that I know carry 2, a personal one and one for work. And you're not going to find a young person that works for us that isn't on that cell phone 23 and a half out of 24 hours a day, checking stuff. He talked about drones. We've yet to see the full potential of what drones might be able to do for us in law enforcement, as well as other aspects of the public. And then, of course, 911 dispatch, having next gen 911, being able to send video directly to a dispatcher of a car leaving the scene, whether it's a car crash or a robbery or an aggravated assault, even language lines. We all live in multi-diverse communities today. I only speak one language. I tried to take on another language and culture. It wasn't good for me. But through the language line, I can have access to 45 different languages and different dialects within those languages. Those are huge improvements in technology that we should embrace and use every single day. And then I won't even get into things like license plate readers and others that, are somewhat controversial with the public. But we know as law enforcement professionals, if you can safeguard privacy and civil liberties, they're absolutely the right way to go. But you got to safeguard the first two before you get to the third one.
Well, and Rich, you bring up, many of those are technologies that are emerging, but the big challenge is, the decision makers, our county boards, our county executives, our administrators, and sometimes our community members who see the cost of these new technologies as cost prohibitive. Body-worn cameras, as an example, I remember my county board saying, well, it's too expensive, but we want more transparency. There's no greater way to find transparency than to watch a video of that police contact unfold, for good or for bad. And as we know in this profession, the videos that are coming out of body-worn cameras are more good than they are bad. So license plate readers, as an example, is another way to decrease these pursuits that are causing the lives of men and women of law enforcement and helping us catch the bad guys who are out there in our communities. So you're absolutely right. Technology, I think, is going to be the biggest tool for leadership in our community. And of course, organized leadership training and having it somewhat consistent across the breadth of this profession so that we're seeing leaders emerge together. In communication, I would like nothing better than to have communication where you can flip a switch and talk to every law enforcement agency within your county when a major incident occurs, like what we saw in Texas with the flooding, and we've seen across the country, most recently this week in Wisconsin with tornadoes. Right now, within my own county, I have 10 cities, 4 of which are on different communication systems. And so it's difficult.
I mean, I used to think a fax machine was pretty cool when I was a detective. I could fax a photo. It only came out black and white, though. That's all it ever was. And good luck trying to figure out who the individual was. But look at it today. Everybody's got access to a camera, a good, high quality camera, and I can send it immediately. Technology is tremendous.
Well, when I started, Rich, I remember typing my first police report on a manual typewriter with copy paper between the pages. So nobody'd believe it today.
Yeah.
So definitely, I love hearing about that, where the level of technology, and it's only going to continue to expand, right? Like you talked about with drones, where is that going to go? There's, there's so much more that can come from that. I want to jump back to something you were saying earlier, Sheriff, just around, and this fed into when you decided to be sheriff. And this really resonates with me. And I'll say it, I don't think it gets out there publicized enough in the importance of, and I'll just read back the notes I was taking while you were saying it. Can you force a culture change? Maybe, but you want to allow it to happen. And that's certainly within a corporate setting. Everybody has their mission, vision, and values, and some of those become a little kind of old and stale. But there's something to it that when you really kind of dig deep and you want to be present, and you want to be, in this instance, in the community, taking feedback, actually listening. Right? I think listening is probably one of the most undervalued and understated task there is, or traits. That's why sometimes I just sit back and I listen to you guys, because I want to be able to hear that. This is an education for me every time. Invite others to be part of it and to bring their ideas to the table as potential solutions. I think that can really empower individuals. So in that, and maybe this covers a much broader territory or ground than we want to go into today, certainly from your actual experience and seeing how it works and speaking to also how the sheriff that followed you has continued to do a great job, maybe even you said a better job, but I think it's building off of what he saw prior. In all that, I think in many instances, people just want to be heard, right? So you allowed that. Do you see that happening in more being on these national boards and being part of NSA and still traveling around and seeing that? Is it a younger crop of sheriffs or individuals that are moving into these national organizations? Do you feel that message is being championed out by you and others and being heard, where a model, and sometimes it can be a very basic model, just show respect, have an open ear, make eye contact, and care about what they're saying? That to me, does it cure everything? No. But I think it kind of puts everyone into a much better light.
Well, there's many points there, but Rich is an outstanding leader in his own right. But I think that there's still some need within leadership training to talk about surveying the culture of the organization and determining whether there needs to be a culture change. I know for a fact that there are agencies across this country that need a culture change. I interact with their leadership. I talk to not only chiefs and sheriffs, but I talk to line staff. And so I do believe that culture change and the desire to change culture, to examine it first, because there may be an agency that doesn't need any change. They're doing everything right. But I think that it is a emerging, because it's not overwhelming, I don't believe, but it's emerging within the leadership training. When I talk about what I did, was first thing I did was I believed that there was a culture breakdown. So I hired a company to do an anonymous survey of the organization to determine the status of our culture. Now, that was met with pessimism, because there's two things that are true about every cop. They don't like the things the way they are, and they don't like to change. And so that itself was a challenge, because there was an element that didn't trust the anonymity of the survey. So it took us some time to actually get a recognizable and quality survey to come forth, and then deliver the outcome to the organization. And my willingness, because there are some leaders who wouldn't want all the negative coming forth, I said, bring it out. Whatever the outcome is, bring it out. And we had several town halls within the organization to talk about the outcome. Then it was, how do we move to solve some of these issues? And the first was to identify a mission statement and identify our values. Well, the first thing I recognized was it shouldn't come from me. As the sheriff, I shouldn't identify what the mission and values are. I hire quality men and women. I hire not for skill. I can teach anybody to be a good law enforcement officer, but if they don't have high character, they're not going to be successful, and I'm not going to have a successful organization. So the first thing we did was form a number of groups, committees, comprised of a cross section of the organization: executive leadership, line leadership, supervisors, and sworn line staff and non-sworn staff, to come together and identify, first of all, our values. I'd been there for, 41 years when I left. I knew what the values were, but I wasn't going to tell the organization what I thought they should be or what they were. I wanted them to tell me, and they did. And guess what? The 6 values that we settled on were values I thought were going to be identified, but it came from a cross section of the organization. And the same with our mission. How we're going to accomplish what our role is in the community was decided by the people. And so it took us several years to get it right into action, be able to put it into action. And then I developed a challenge coin that had our values on it. And I asked everybody in the organization, from my chief deputy to every new hire that was sworn in to every non-sworn civilian position, to carry that coin with them every day. And some will say it sounds hokey, but I still carry it with me 4 years after retirement. And on one side is our shield that identifies who we are. And the backside has the 6 values that identify how we operate and what we believe in. And I ask every individual, carry that with you, that when you're on the job and you have to make a decision, check that coin. Does that decision fall within those 6 values? And if it does, it's the right decision. If it doesn't, you need to think about it a little bit more. And when you're off duty, in your personal conduct, think about those 6 values. And if what you're doing falls within that value spectrum, then it's the right decision. If it's not, then take a little bit of time and reconsider, and you'll never get in trouble. And at the end of the day, I'm going to carry that coin with me. I still use it. I still pull it out at times when I have to make a decision.
Yep.
Before I send an email, I look at that value coin, and does the email I'm going to send represent my organization? Even though I'm gone for 4 years, when my name shows up, it's going to represent the Dane County Sheriff's Office. Mm-hmm. So is my email, is my text going to fall in line with those 6 values? Today, it will continue. And so over time, it kind of grew like a garden. We planted the seeds, we fertilized it, we watered it. Sometimes we had to pull some weeds out of that garden. But at the end of the day, it turned out to be a beautiful garden that produced fruit for the community in which we serve.
That's powerful. That's so powerful. I appreciate you going through that, because in that I can completely picture it. I even pictured the weeds in the garden, right? But that tells such a great story of, are you committed, right? Are you dedicated?
Well, every one of us in this great profession, on the day that we raised our hand and accepted the contract to serve others before oneself, we recognize that in life we're going to be treated different. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be. Even when we're on duty, there's an expectation of behavior, but that same behavior is expected off duty.
Yeah.
And in your personal life, because I've been out of the job for 4 years, but every day I run into people who call me sheriff. And my actions, my statements reflect that organization, even though I'm not there making decisions. And it will forever. We have to, those of us who entered this profession and said, I will and I do, recognize the fact that it carries on.
Hi, I'm Scott with Prime Health Services and Prime Corrections. And when I'm not hosting with Sheriff Stanek, I wanted to take a few moments and talk about our offsite inmate medical cost containment solution. So if you're running a jail and you have to take an inmate off-site for medical treatment of any type, have you ever paid full bill charges for that expense? Hopefully not. But if you have, let Prime help you out. So what we do, every day we receive many bills. I'll give you one example of a bill we just processed this week. This was for a county in Florida. This was for an air ambulance treatment. The total bill, $53,256. Through our scrubbing process and negotiations, we were able to reduce that bill down to $8,447.26. That is, that's a savings of 84%. So if you are looking to save on your offsite inmate medical expense, contact Prime. You can reach us via a link below. You can also send an email directly to corrections@primehealthservices.com. That's corrections@primehealthservices.com. Let Prime show you and let Prime help you save money. Thanks, and have a great day.